Welcome back to the podcast where we're not going to require you to wear shoes or put your phone in the locker. This is the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and joining me this week is my buddy up in Ohio, Nick Weisenberger. Nick, welcome back to the Coaster101 podcast. What's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me. Not too much. How are you?
I'm good. I've got to check though. Do you have your shoes with backs or your sandals with straps?
I've got my shoes ready to go and an extra pair just in case.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we're going to start this week's show. Obviously, it says something about Disney in your podcast feed, and both Nick and myself, we had a little bit of a bi-coastal Disney excursion over spring break. Nick took his family to Disneyland. I was at Walt Disney World for a work conference, and because it was a work conference, I was able to sneak some park time or ramrod force some park time. But as we're recording this, the news kind of dropped earlier today that Cedar Point has come out with some ride guidelines, safety guidelines, whatever their preferred nomenclature is for, all the things you have to do in order to ride Top Thrill 2. And the big ones that came out today were you can't wear flip-flops or any type of open back shoe. So a sandal with a strap was fine. Tennis shoes are fine, but flip-flops or slides, something like that, not fine. And then on top of that, no loose articles whatsoever. Guests are going to walk through metal detectors. So no phones, no cameras, no keys, none of that. And it all has to go into a locker before you enter the queue. So Nick, I'll start with you. And I know you and our buddy Kyle, fellow Coaster One rider, are actually headed up to Sandusky later this week for some first rides on Top Thrill 2, I believe. But what are your initial thoughts on this park policy, the safety policies that have come out for Top Thrill 2? Personally, for me, I'm fine with it, and I'm fine. I think the park has given enough notice. And I think the downside is not everybody is extremely online as we are and might miss it. But I think the park has done the best thing possible by giving people the advance notice. But what are your initial thoughts when you saw this come out earlier today?
Yeah, I think the loose article policy should pretty much be expected at this point in time. Like any roller coaster that's super large, aggressive, very dynamic, I think it should just be kind of expected of your guests that you're going to have to store your loose articles because it's a safety thing. I mean, you look at the biggest parks like Universal, Velocicoaster, things like that, you have to go through a metal detector and store all your items. So I think that at this point, like if you're going to be riding a huge dynamic coaster, it should be expected you're going to have to store your loose articles. To me, the bigger one is the shoe one, because I feel like that's something that you need to know before you get into the park or even before you leave your house. Because with the loose articles, you have options. You can put it in a locker, you can leave it with someone. But if you don't have shoes, that's a problem. I mean, even if you have a backup pair in the car, that's really inconvenient to have to walk all the way from Top Thrill 2 all the way to the parking lot, get your shoes, go back. So I hope the park is just really proactive in getting that message out. And, I hope they have some big signs like by the entrance before you scan your ticket. Like if you want to ride this, you need to have this kind of footwear.
Yeah, I think that like, again, if it's emailing everybody who's bought a season pass and saying, hey, this came out today, you got to wear shoes. The loose articles, they got to go in a locker, but the loose articles should go in a locker. But I agree with you. The shoes thing.
Every online ticket,
it needs
anytime someone buys a ticket online, it should say on there, big bold, you need
big,
shoes
bold,
to ride.
red letters. You need closed-toe or closed-heeled shoes, whatever their preferred verbiage was. Basically, not flip-flops. Though I kind of like, I'm of the opinion, and Cedar Point to me is a huge park. It is pretty enormous as amusement park, theme park standards go. How are people schlepping around all day in this park in like flip-flops and slides? I mean, I've always been a sneakers or tennis shoes person at a park. I walked around Universal one time when I was in like high school, middle school, with flip flops because we were like coming off a cruise and I had packed my shoes or something. But like I can't do it. It's gonna make my feet hurt too much. So I more power to you if you're the type of person who can walk around in a like enormous theme park. And I know the last time we went to Cedar Point, we were there for Coaster Mania in 2019, 2018, something like that. And we logged like 26 miles over 2 days. Flip flops aren't built for that for me. And
Not for me, but I think our fellow writers John and Eric can both walk around the park all day in sandals, but yeah, not me.
yeah, they've got the strap sandals, which I think are different from flip flops. Anyway, this is a big deal. Or it is a big deal that shouldn't be a big deal. I guess I'm going to put it that way. Our advice: if you're going to Cedar Point this summer or anytime in the near future, and are wanting to ride Top Thrill 2, and I feel like a lot of our listening audience is, pack an extra pair of shoes. If you've got one of those, drawstring gym bags or backpacks, I put it out on Twitter today. It's like people go to water parks all the time and pack a change of clothes. It's not that hard if you're dead set on walking around in flip flops all day. Pack a pair of tennis shoes, swap them out, throw that bag in a locker, and then just bring a pair of shoes to Cedar Point this year. That's our advice. And this is the friendly PSA helping Cedar Point get the word out from your buddies at Coaster101.com. So that's I think we've said enough about shoes and loose items and keys and lockers and all this other things. I personally, again, I'm not anti-locker. I think lockers they speed up the efficiency. I was at Carowinds over the weekend and I had a bag and I was like crossing over seats. And then you got to make awkward conversation if somebody's ahead of you. And it's like, hey, I got to put my bag in the locker. Yeah. So, I got to put my bag in the bin and then I got to come back and get in the seat. So it's just,
and that's the funny thing too, is that we're going to be talking about Disney where you can take entire backpacks or you can pretty much take almost anything on their rides. Here's the exact
this is a
opposite.
really, really, really good point, but a fantastic segue. So Nick, thank you for that. Cause I don't know how we were going to get from shoes and lockers to spring break at Disney World and Disneyland, but spring break at Disney World and Disneyland Nick, last couple of years, you've taken your family on a kind of a big spring break theme park trip. And this year you took your wife and two kids, former podcast guests. You took them to Disneyland this year. So yeah. When was the last time you had been to Disneyland yourself? I'm assuming the kids and your wife had never been, but when was the last time you had been, if at all?
Yeah, that was their first time. I had been once before back in 2006. So this was before Cars Land. I think like the Monsters Inc. ride makeover was the newest thing. And so we actually did both Disneyland and California Adventure in one day. That's still when they had like the paper fast passes. So we were able to do a lot. But yeah, it's changed a lot since 2006.
I believe it. Yeah, I went once. It would have been 2012 or 2013. And I had one day I was visiting my college roommate who lived in Southern California. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do a park to park. I'm going to hit some highlights, things I can do at both parks, like Jungle Cruise, Space Mountain, Pirates, things to, see the differences. Obviously rode California Screamin', but I feel like there was a lot of things that I missed and I've yet to go back. And again, it's been over a decade at this point. You guys stayed at the Pixar Pier Hotel, which I think it's another hotel that just underwent a long renovation and retheme. But, what can you tell our audience about the Pixar Pier Hotel?
Yeah. So the Disneyland Resort, unlike Disney World that has 20 something on-site hotels, Disneyland has 3. The Grand California, which is the most expensive, then the Disneyland Hotel, and then Pixar Place Hotel. So when I booked the hotel back in November, it was actually still called Paradise Pier Hotel, I think, which was a former, the theme of that area of the California Adventure theme park was the Paradise Pier, which then changed to Pixar Pier. and you can see the hotel like from behind from the theme park behind it. So they kind of changed it to match that theme. But yeah, like overall, we liked it. Um, it's the cheapest of the three hotels, but it's not cheap at all. So that's when you're going, you kind of have to weigh: is it worth staying there? The main benefit is it's close. You can just walk across the street, and there's a private entrance into California Adventure. And then the other main reason is you get a half an hour of early entry into one of the two parks every day. Besides that, like it's got some pretty nice theming, a nice pool area. Biggest downside was noise. So we were staying in this room that has like the adjacent door to the room next door, and all the
Mhm.
noise just went right through that door. Like we could hear everything the neighbors were doing. And then when our kids were up at 5 a.m. because we were still on the East Coast time, I'm sure they could hear every single thing from our room. So like for a
Ooh.
hotel that's priced as high as it is, I thought that was unacceptable.
Was there a lot of theming in the rooms? Like when I think of a Disney hotel again as an East Coast Disney person, I think of the highly themed kind of value resort and moderate resort. They've got a really good theme on the outside. The inside, there's some subtle touches. But were the rooms like heavily Pixar themed too, or did they just kind of have
Yeah, because I
just
mean they still
generic
have like
hotel feature?
artwork on the walls, and they had like the Luxor lamp, the Pixar lamp, and different theming like that. And they, I mean, all I think all the rooms have like the Art of Pixar animation book that you can look through. So there's some definitely a step up, I think, from like the Disney World value hotels.
Okay, cool. So what about the parks itself? You guys were what'd you have 2 or 3 park days while you were out there?
So we ended up having 4 park days because we just decided to go all in and just do all Disney, because we were debating like should we do other things, or like how many days should we have. And so we didn't want to have to rush and like be all have a bunch of anxiety about doing everything we wanted to do. So we said, okay, let's just have 4 days, and then that way like we could take our time. We Every single day we went back to the hotel in the middle of the day for like a 2 or 3 hour period to go swimming and take a nap and that kind of thing.
Okay. And it was your first time there since '06, but what were some of your let's go with your personal highlights, and then I'm sure you've got the personal highlights of your kids as well.
Yeah, so for me, like some of the biggest things were at California Adventure. So Radiator Springs Racers being probably my most anticipated ride. Love that ride. Also, World of Color show. We saw that once. Um, and then at Disneyland, we had not been on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, because the last time we were at Disney World was in February of 2020. So that was before that
Hmm.
ride opened there. So that was a brand new ride to us. And then yeah, just riding all the classics. Last time I was at Disneyland, Pirates of the Caribbean was closed, so I was really excited to get on that because it's like a lot of the rides at Disneyland, their version is better than the one at Disney World. Like Pirates is like twice as long.
Hmm. Plus, it's got the that Blue Bayou restaurant, so you kind of have like the what is it, Grand Fiesta Tour Rio del Tiempo, where you kind of roll by the restaurant
Yeah,
before the ride starts, which I think is pretty neat. Um,
definitely.
Obviously, their Space Mountain it's 2 across instead of 1 across,
Yep.
so there's some subtle differences, but I think all in all, it's you know I think there's a good comparison, but I think again, just as an East Coaster who's been to Disney World 100 times, I think we can always say that Disneyland might be a little bit better, right?
Yeah, I think it depends too. Like if you're looking at the outside of the parks versus the inside of the parks. So I think Disney World probably has the better like resort outside of the park. There's more hotel options. Disney Springs is way bigger. They have more transportation options. Like you have boats and the Skyliner and the monorail and all that. And they have the 2 water parks. And there's a lot more activities. Like it's more of a resort, more of like a vacation feel, because you can go boating, you can go fishing. So there's a lot more options outside the parks, like on Disney property. But I
Hmm.
think inside the parks, I much prefer Disneyland, especially if you're a
Okay.
rides person like I am. Like Disneyland has more rides than I think all the 4 Disney World parks combined. if I
It
remember
wouldn't
correctly.
surprise me. That's for sure. And you recently wrote an article on Coaster101.com. So head to our website if you're listening to this. Again, you didn't have to put your phone in a locker, so you can look at it right now while you're listening. Unless you're driving, don't do that. But you took a different approach to what I would call like a Disney attractions article, and you kind of broke it up by time. It was like you took the time spent waiting in line versus the time spent actually on the attraction itself. And I thought there were some pretty interesting findings in your data there, like how you would wait on something like the Liberty boat or Liberty Bell Riverboat, which I think is what it's called on the West Coast. I know it's called that on the East Coast, or the Walt Disney World Railroad, Disneyland Railroad. Um, those obviously didn't have longer lines, but you were on the attractions longer. But what were some of the more surprising things you saw, and that where you were like, "Huh, well, why did I wait in all this line for not that much time?"
Yeah, so that article I'm looking at like the best and worst time value rides. So how much time are you spent waiting in line, and then how much time do you spend on the ride itself, and then what does that ratio look like? And it gets a little bit subjective, like how you classify the ride time, because do you include the pre-shows or not? Because a ride like Star Wars Rise of the Resistance has incredible pre-shows. I feel like you really have to include the full experience. Um, so it's a little bit subjective in that part, but basically I looked at this website Q Times that is tracking all the wait times of all the rides over the years, so you can come up with the average time that you're going to wait for each attraction. So then I looked at that, and then just looked at like POV videos on YouTube for the ride duration, and then just compared the overall average wait time to the ride duration. So like the number one ride, like best value, was the Mark Twain Riverboat, because on average you only have to wait 8 minutes to ride it, but the ride time is 16 minutes long.
So you're
So the
basically
ride is
waiting
twice
half
as
it.
long as you're gonna wait.
Right. And then the worst, which I thought was hilarious, was the Chippendale Rescue Rangers gadget coaster.
Yeah, because the one that I thought of, like the ride that gave me the idea to look into this, I was thinking about Peter Pan's Flight, because I was thinking like that ride, the wait is always long. It's always more than 35 minutes, and it's a 2 minute long ride. So I'm just thinking like that is like, in terms of if you're looking at everything as value, like that's got to be one of the worst value rides at Disneyland in terms of like wait versus ride time. So that's the kind of the ride that kind of sparked the whole thing where I started looking at it. But yeah, like similar as the Dumbo ride was one of the few rides that we didn't do because the wait was always like 20, 30, 40 minutes, and that's a 1.5 minute long ride.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of Peter Pan, and I want to talk through this. I want to hear your story. I've seen it on our social media. I want your perspective here of the dog incident on Peter Pan. And if you're unfamiliar, I think we're going to let Nick tell the story here. But there was it a service dog that got loose on the Peter Pan ride?
Yeah, I'll have to tell this full story because there were some people that were did not believe the story, so I'll have to lay the whole thing out. But basically, I thought we got pretty lucky this trip that we didn't have to wait more than like 20 minutes for anything until the very last ride of the trip, which was for Peter Pan's Flight. So this was Wednesday. We had just ridden the Pirates of the Caribbean. So Sarah and Henry and Nora, they were going to go back to the hotel to watch the fireworks, and I was going to stay in the park and do a couple more rides since this was our last day. So we were like, well, let's do one more ride together as a family, and then that'll be it. And then they'll leave and go back, because at the hotel, one end of the pool deck, you can see the fireworks, and they pump in the music from the show and everything. So again, Peter Pan had like a 40+ minute wait all day long. So I pull up the app, and it's only showing a 30-minute wait. So I'm like, oh, we can do that. Like, let's go try Peter Pan. So we get in line at 8:18 p.m. which I know because I wrote down because I'm a nerd. I was making a list of all the rides that we did because I had a checklist before we go. And I was like checking off all the rides as we did them and that kind of thing. So we got in line at 8:18. The wait time was posted at 30 minutes. So it's like 40 minutes into this wait, somewhere like between 9:50 and 9 o'clock. And Mickey's Mix Magic with fireworks was supposed to be at 9:30. So somewhere around 9, we're getting pretty close to the station, and we hear someone say, "Oh, that's a cute dog." So we all look, and there's a woman getting on the ride. And she's got this little white dog with her, and they put down the lap bar, and like initially she's trying to like put the dog on the seat next to her. So they like send the ride, and it's the boat, this Peter Pan, it's a boat that hangs from the ceiling and goes kind of high off the ground, but it starts going. And then like the woman is like tries to put the dog on the floor of the boat to sit there. And as they like start lifting off and going into the first scene in the bedroom, the dog's like, nope, not having this. And it jumps off the boat. So then everyone in line was like, what? And they all like surge forward and they're looking, and you can hear like the dog's claws like scampering over the rooftops of London.
Oh
and the dog had a leash on, but she wasn't holding, I don't know. And so the ride operator stopped the ride, but the person's boat like had already gone into the first scene. But luckily, it looked like there were a couple people who were with her who were still in line. So they got out and they got the dog, and the dog appeared to be okay. But it was just like one of the most bizarre things I'd ever seen. So then they had to shut down the ride and get everybody off the ride and then cycled it empty. So like at that point, we could have got out of line, but we had already waited 40 minutes. So we decided to try to stick it out. And so like the rest of the line, most of the people behind us got out of line. And I think at some point they probably, when the ride was down, they didn't let anyone else in the line. So like the outdoor portion of the queue was empty, but we were underneath the covered part. So at 9:30, the fireworks start. Like we can see them, we can hear them. And they were cycling the ride at this point. So we knew it was going to start soon. So then we got on the ride. It was probably about 9:38 because we got off the ride at 9:40, which again, I know because I wrote down, and the fireworks had just ended. So we missed the fireworks because we were on the ride. And so there's a bunch of people on Facebook being like, oh, there's no way you would have rode the ride during the fireworks. I'm like, I'm telling you we did. I don't know why you don't believe me. Plus somebody else commented and verified our story. Like, yeah, I was there. I saw it too. But yeah, it was just crazy. I actually went later and then looked up like the policy on animals at Disneyland, and you can have a trained service dog or a trained miniature horse.
Yes.
But you cannot have an emotional support dog.
Right. And I think you could have had I think there used to be a lot like wider swath of animals. Like I've heard like people have like their emotional support monkey or whatever. I've seen a miniature horse at a Disney park one time.
Really?
Years ago at Epcot. Uh-huh.
Wow.
It was Epcot. It was right there, right before you get to the Mexico Pavilion. There was like a character meet and greet, and the mini horse was meeting Donald Duck. Like, this is a memory that will forever be burned into my brain, and I'm just like, why are people? But, everybody needs their, service animal or claim that they need their service animal, and clearly
that was one of the questions and conversation on the Facebook page was, we're assuming that some like the DAS program, a lot of people probably abuse that. There's probably people that abuse the service dog aspect as well.
Yeah. When you see the service dog dressed up like Winnie the Pooh with poo ears, again, who am I to judge? I don't have a service animal. I've never needed really to take a service animal into a theme park. I've seen them. But yeah, I hate that you missed the fireworks. But again, you've got a great story to tell that nobody on Facebook seems to believe, which is the best kind of Facebook story. So that is fantastic. And, you were checking the rides off. I know you've got 6 coaster credits at Disneyland and California Adventure. Did you get on all 6 coasters? we are a roller coaster
Yep.
podcast. I have to ask this question.
I think I've been on 3 before, so I got the 3 ones that I had not been on.
Okay, so are you close to 300 yet? You're coming up there, aren't you?
I'm at like 293 or something like that. It's getting close.
Okay,
I just need to go to one park that has like 10 coasters, and I'm good.
Okay, and we need to get you a better, because I think I was with you when you had either your 200 or 250th, and it was Sprocket Rockets at Six Flags Great Adventures or Great America, and we need to get you a better milestone coaster. So,
Yep. And I heard someone say that you can't, like, adults can't ride that by themselves anymore. Like, you have to have a kid. So I at least feel lucky that I got that credit.
rare credit. I love it. Anything else before we fly 3,000 miles across the country and hear about my Walt Disney World spring break adventures?
I guess just for like advice, if you're planning to go, is just do your research. Is the biggest thing. There was a YouTube channel, the Southern California Dad. I watched a lot of his videos. They were very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, I think research is important because, and I've got a great just guest story. It's not Facebook worthy, but I don't think anybody will actually believe it. So I was in Orlando for a work conference, and the conference was Wednesday. No, the conference was Thursday, Friday. I flew in early Wednesday with the express goal of going to Magic Kingdom and getting on TRON and figuring out a way to get on TRON, because I hadn't been. It was one of those I remained as mostly spoiler free as I could. And then my other goal for this trip was to get on Guardians of the Galaxy, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. So I had this trip nailed down pretty well. I flew in, had an early morning flight out of Charlotte, landed in Orlando, Ubered to the hotel, checked in, dropped my bags at the front desk because my room wasn't ready yet. I took a bus, and because I was staying at the Dolphin Hotel, which is on Disney property but not technically a Disney hotel, the bus drops you at the Transportation and Ticket Center instead of the park. And I get off this bus, and the way the bus stop is kind of oriented towards the Transportation and Ticket Center. If you're looking where like the monorail is straight ahead, the ferry boat is over to your left, and then there's all those old ticket booths. And Transportation and Ticket Center is like a core memory for me as a kid. And I don't know why, because it's like, I just want to go to Magic Kingdom. Why are we here? But I get off, and it's at the right side of the Transportation and Ticket, right before you get to those ticket booths. And we get off there, and there's this woman like looking at a map, looking at her phone. She's in a dead frenzy. And we're getting off this bus from the Swan and Dolphin, and she looks at us, she goes, "Do you guys know where Disney is?" And she was like really, really confused. And I was like, there was a scene in the movie Rat Race, which came out, like John Lovitz goes, "Yes, you're in it."
I was gonna say, "Ma'am, but you are there.
You're there. You just gotta." But I don't want to say I couldn't be bothered, but there are some questions that I even can't answer with a straight face. Like, I wasn't even about to be like, "Hey, follow me. We're all going to the same place."
I assume she means the Magic Kingdom.
Yes, I mean, again, Walt Disney World, big place. I was half expecting her to ask where Hogwarts was.
That's what I was going to say. She probably wondered, where's the Harry Potter land?
Harry Potter world. Oh boy. So yeah, I was there in Magic Kingdom, in Walt Disney World proper, but it was spring break, and I famously do not like lines. Like when I was at Carowinds over the weekend, it was a Saturday, and I left Carowinds after like 2.5 hours because it was getting busy, and I was like, "Hey, I can come back anytime I want, so it's okay." So, and that was a trip that didn't include Fury, didn't include Copperhead Strike, didn't include Thunderstriker, but included Nighthawk, Flying Cobras, Gold Rusher, and Hurler, because that's decisions were made that day. But anyway, back to Disney.
How'd your back feel after that?
It was. I haven't been to a chiropractor in a while. I should probably go back. But we I get there and I'm trying to kind of learn the Genie Plus, and I paid for the one part Genie Plus, and this is back during spring break when Genie Plus was selling out by like 10 a.m. and I was so nervous. I had a 7 a.m. flight, so I had to leave my house at 5 a.m. I was up at 1 a.m. and I bought Genie Plus because I couldn't sleep because I was nervous. And it was like, this is not the way I like to like figure things out. But I got to give a big shout out to Andrew from Park Rovers. It's different Andrew, not me. Because I know he listens to the show. And I got to thank him because he goes down to Disney with some level of frequency. And so he was explaining to me the ins and outs of GD Plus and Lightning Lanes and things like that. So I got on my plane. As the plane is like taxiing before they tell me to turn off my put my phone in airplane mode. I booked my first Lightning Lane of the day for Space Mountain, and then I land, and this is 9 o'clock or whatever. You book the first one at 7, then you can book the next one. I think 2 hours later or 2 hours after park open. There's a gap of time here, but I had 2 Lightning Lanes booked before I got into the park, which I thought was pretty clutch. So I went straight to Space Mountain. Then I went over to Haunted Mansion on the Lightning Lanes. I had bought a individual Lightning Lane for Tron because, again, the nerves were like, oh, I'm not going to get a boarding group even with the afternoon drop. So I ended up riding Tron twice that day because I
Nice.
paid for it. And then right after that, I got my call back, and then I had paid for a time that ended up being right after that. So I got to ride Tron basically back to back, which was nice. But with the Lightning Lanes, it was having fun trying to kind of maneuver that system. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but was surprisingly a lot easier than I thought it would be. I ended up, I think, with 4 or 5 Lightning Lanes plus the individual Lightning Lane I bought for Tron, which that was good. But I was doing things that I wouldn't typically do during a Disney vacation. Like the crowds were insane, and I wasn't going to wait an hour or more to ride something like the Tomorrowland Speedway or, Jungle Cruise always has a long queue. I missed that one, but I got to ride pretty much everything else. I skipped Thunder Mountain, Seven Dwarfs, and Jungle Cruise. Those are the ones that I typically would have ridden. So I spent a lot of time in Tomorrowland. I waited 15 minutes for the People Mover. That's how busy the crowd was. It had like a long extended queue.
I saw some videos like on TikTok of the crazy spring break crowds at Disney World.
Unreal. Absolutely unreal. But so in my Magic Kingdom day, not only did I do the Carousel of Progress, which broke down while we were in it because somebody got bored and left, and so they had to replay one of the scenes. But I also did Hall of Presidents like that in the same time frame. So I did a lot of sitting. But these are attractions I don't typically. Yeah, it was a nice day. It was warm. I didn't necessarily need the black long sleeve shirt and melt in the Florida humidity. But I got to ride Tron, which was fantastic. And I think everybody wants to compare Tron to Velocicoaster because they kind of opened at the same time, and that's what everybody likes to do in Orlando is like, hey, let's compare this to this other thing that doesn't really exist because they open around the same time. It's like Velocicoaster and Iron Gwazi opening in the same year. They're like, which is better? And it's like they're very apples and oranges comparison. But I think, excuse me. I think the biggest comparison or the best comparison I can make to Tron is it's not Velocicoaster at all. But if I were to compare it to a Universal Orlando coaster, it would be like Mummy, Revenge of the Mummy at Universal Studios Florida, but with 20 years advanced technology. So you had the launch, and that launch was super impressive, super forceful. Nothing I've ever experienced at a Disney park quite like that, and that changed the next day, but we'll get there in a second. Um, but that first launch is great. But the indoor scenes reminded me so much of Revenge of the Mummy as you're kind of going through um, the openings, which I don't know the proper
With like the
TRON
projection
terminology.
effects.
Yeah, like the projection effects and like the portals and things like that. Really, really fun ride. And they've got a great locker system down there, the double-sided lockers that worked with your Magic Band, which I thought was pretty neat. Um, but didn't get to ride it at night. I did actually head over to Disney Springs and I met our buddy Shane, who's down in Orlando. So he met me for dinner and we hung out for a little bit. But yeah, that was Magic Kingdom. I don't recommend going during spring break if you can at all help it. Like whenever there are kids out of school, just try not to go. If kids are in school, try to go. I think that's the best point of advice I can give you there. But the next day I had the conference all day. The conference ended about 6 o'clock, and it lined up with an Epcot after hours. And again, my goals for this trip were one, ride Tron, two, ride Guardians of the Galaxy, and multiple times for both if I could. And the perk with Epcot after hours that makes this ticket worth its weight in gold. You don't have to wait for a boarding group. You don't have to play boarding group roulette or whatever in the morning or at 1 p.m. When the park closes at 9, you go straight over there. You walk through the queue. You watch all 17 pre-shows at Guardians of the Galaxy. You ignore the other one because that's another one. That's another thing that's like internet discourse this week is people ignoring the Guardians pre-show so they can just go ahead and get on the ride. But you can ride it more than once. And this was a coaster again I had remained really, really spoiler free on. And once I got on there, the only thing I had piece of advice was from Shane. He said, if you can, ride in row 9 because that has the best coaster experience. So I rode. I asked the cast member. They were very nice. They let me ride in row 9, and so I don't really. I have no idea what's going on. I have not seen a POV. I have not seen if the ride came up on TikTok. I was swiping past at that point. Um, because like Nick, I hadn't been to Walt Disney World since February 2020.
Mm.
I was there, I think, a week before Nick was. So neither of us had ridden Runaway Railway, but that also meant no Tron, no Guardians. So I've been as spoiler free as possible. But I got on that ride and I had no idea what was happening. And Flock of Seagulls, I Ran comes on, and then I'm launched. I'm like just blown away by all the impressive visuals, the coaster elements, how the cars are moving. I'm trying to remain as general and spoiler free as I can here, but that was an amazing ride and definitely, in my opinion, the best coaster at any Disney park in the United States for sure.
Oh
Maybe
wow.
maybe the world. I don't know because I'd have to actually visit some of these other foreign Disney parks, ride the coasters, but
So
easily the best Disney coaster I've ever experienced.
and the thing that sets that apart is it has the controlled spinny seats, right? So was it?
Yes,
What did you think of the spinning? Was it? Did it make you queasy at all, or and like
no,
do
it
you
was it was
typically
a
like spinning coasters?
hate them, absolutely hate them. I know, I will ride them for the credit, but man, I've ridden one too many SBF spinners in my day, or those mock rides spinners, or who is it? Is it Mock who makes the like the Sierra Sidewinder at Knott's? Was that Mock? I don't know, but
Yes, I
those
believe.
they
Yeah.
spin, and I don't like the heavy spinning. And our guy Adam Sandy at Zamperlo with Tidal Twist, that was another one. I think I
Oh
was with
yeah.
you when I rode that
Yeah.
actually, and
Yep.
we were spinning pretty good, and I think we almost flung your son out of the ride.
Yeah.
But I don't like spinning, but the controlled spinning was nice. It almost felt like we were drifting in a way, in kind of that back car. It was a really interesting feeling. I didn't feel like I was spinning, but it was a really, really unique experience. And I think the theming, the story, such as it is, I mean, is it a little forced that Peter Quill built something because he went to Epcot as a kid? Probably. Because, I went to I've never seen the Guardians movies. Oops, sorry. But I knew enough of the story to kind of get by. But it was really good. I enjoyed it. And then the best part about After Hours is after I was done, I popped down the exit line and went right back through and did the whole thing right over again. I waited maybe 15 minutes total, and that includes the pre-shows.
Wow,
And was,
awesome.
got Earth, Wind, and Fire September on my other ride, which I thought was a fantastic way. People swear by a couple of different songs, but September was probably my favorite of the two rides I had. But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, bar none, best Disney coaster there is, and I'll fight that battle. I think that's a take I'm willing to kind of stand up for. Um, but the rest of After Hours, I think if I wanted to, I could have done every attraction at Epcot from when I got in the park about 7 o'clock until the park closed at 1. And I still had a conference the next day, so I was out of there about 12:15, and then walked back to the hotel. Um, Also got to ride Ratatouille, which was really fun. Really, really well done. There was a moment in there where I don't know if I was sitting in the wrong place, the wrong time, but there was a water effect that was the most violent water effect I've ever had
Really?
on a 3D ride. It caught me right in the face, and I was just like, that was excessive. But I
Have you been
really,
on Mickey and
but
Minnie's Runaway Railway?
I haven't. It was
Okay,
it was one of those things I wanted to do it on this trip, but the park hopper ticket wasn't. I don't think I was going to get the value of the park hopper ticket, so it was just like it'll be there one day, or I can ride it at Disneyland.
'cause-
But
yeah, I was going to ask you like how they compare because they're both the trackless dark rides, but
yeah,
it's future
the
discussion.
trackless the trackless dark rides are great. I mean, my only other point of comparison is the now retired Empire of the Penguin at SeaWorld Orlando, which did the trackless technology really cool for like 40 seconds, and then the ride was over. So this was really neat. It was a really great use of that technology with the integrated 3D and kind of the screens and oversized props. So I'm glad that we finally got this stateside, and Epcot's got another ride. But to me, if you're asking me the best way to experience a Disney park, especially if you're on a time crunch or if you've been there before and just want to hit some highlights, those after hours events, they're perfect. And you can get in a couple hours before park close. They'll give you all the soda and ice cream and popcorn that you want, and you're barely waiting for anything, which was amazing.
And you've
So
done the Orlando Informer meetups at Universal
I
before. So
have.
how do those compare to the after hours at Disney? And which one do you like better?
Ooh, this is a tough one. The one thing I will say about the Orlando Informer meetup, as opposed to the after hours event, is all the rides are open, but they're both open at both parks. All the restaurants during the Orlando Informer meetup at Universal are open, so you can eat whatever you want. You can gorge yourself on butterbeer or butterbeer ice cream or butterbeer fudge or Jurassic Park burgers or even Wimpy's, which I think is never open, is open. And the Green Eggs and Ham Cafe is open. Like all these places are open. So for the food alone, I think I would go with Orlando Informer. But I think they're both great events. And being the anti-line snob that I am, I would almost rather go to those events than go to the park during the day. Which,
Yeah.
oops. But again, I've been to Walt Disney World a lot. I grew up in Florida. I've been to Universal a lot. So when I can go down there and my time is limited as it is, living in North Carolina, you got to maximize it to the best of your ability. And those events with a rather steep ticket price, if we're being completely honest, it is Disney and Universal after all. They allow me to kind of attack the park at a pace that I would want to actually attack a park and not spend most of the time waiting in line. So I think those are the best ways those after hours, you don't have as much time. But especially in a park like Epcot that I think has like 9 or 10 rides
Yeah, not
max,
that many.
and I'm not going to ride Mission Space because I really don't want to, throw up. I'm not going to ride El Rio del Tiempo or Grand Fiesta Tour or whatever that ride is called with, the Mexico boat ride with Donald Duck. Um, just because I don't really want to ride that. But every other ride I was able to ride that night. And I skipped Frozen because I've ridden Frozen a couple of times before. But yeah, I legitimately could have done the entire park that night if I wanted to in the span of about. Got in at 7, the park closed at 1, so 6 hours. 100% could have ridden every ride, and I could have walked through that Moana Journey of Water, which I'm sorry. I know a lot of people worked really hard on that, but to me it's just a waste of space. I'm sorry. If you like it, I understand. And I walked through it at night and it was really cool, but there were a lot of people just kind of like milling around, and it's like, okay, well this is neat, but where's the payoff? And then you get to the end and you're like, where's the payoff? So there were some two really cool like sculpture areas and some really cool water effects, but really the best thing about the journey to or Journey of Water featuring Moana or inspired by Moana is the angles that you can see Spaceship Earth at night and look and get cool pictures. So that's my Disney hot take. Very pro after hours events, anti Moana water attraction.
But other water
So,
attractions you liked was Living with the Land, correct?
oh my gosh, that's my favorite ride at all of Epcot. Believe it or not. Well, okay, I take that. It's my second favorite ride now that I've ridden Guardians. I have this affinity for Living with the Land. I don't know if it's because I'm a fat kid who likes to eat, but going through that greenhouse is just it's it is nostalgia. It is my childhood, and it all comes rushing back as you see the hydroponic plants and the alligators and the aquaculture and all those things, and then you see that lab that there's never anybody in, but somebody works there. Oh my gosh, I love the land so much. I think as slow moving water rides go, I think the land is top tier. But more to come on that later, as long as you stay tuned to Coaster101.com.
Dun, dun, dun.
So
good teaser.
Good teaser. But on the subject of good teasers, I think we've talked Disney enough, and there are a lot of podcasts out there that talk all things Disney, so we appreciate you bearing with us. But on the subject of teasers and spoilers, and stay tuned. Next week, we're going to have one of our newer writers, Evan Scharf. He's going to join us to talk about Iron Menace. He was down there at Iron Menace Media Day, up for me in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He had a great time, so we're going to get Evan on the show to talk Iron Menace. And I think a couple weeks after that, or a couple days after that, we're going to get Nick and Kyle back on because they're going to be up at Cedar Point for Top Thrill 2 Media Day, complete with closed-toed shoes. So, Nick, before we wrap this up, anything else you want to talk about Disney-wise or otherwise?
I was just going to ask you about what were your thoughts on Genie Plus. Because I know for me, like before I went on the trip, I had kind of like a negative perception of it. And I think that was mostly just due to the cost. Because this was like, you used to be able to get fast passes for free. Now you got to pay for this service.
Right.
But then, like, we bought Genie Plus when we got our tickets, which was like 3 months in advance. So by the time you're in the park, you're not even thinking about the cost anymore. And then actually using the system was really easy. And I found myself actually like really loving it because it was easy to use, saves a lot of time. So I ended up really thinking that, the whole lightning lane system works pretty well. But what did you think about it at Disney World?
It's obviously very different for me as a solo traveler compared to you, who was, if Genie Plus it cost you $25, that meant you were out $100 for that day.
Yeah.
For me, it was, I think, $39, which was compared to the actual ticket itself was nothing, and I wasn't paying for parking, so it was like paying for parking. But yeah, I felt it was really intuitive, really easy to use. It's obviously very easy to get reservations for one person for pretty much whatever time wanted to do anything. And I did find myself, kind of waiting and walking around for in between lightning lanes. I think the only attraction I actually waited in line for, and this is going to sound really stupid and terrible, was the Monsters Inc. laugh floor. But I love that attraction so much because dad jokes are my thing. I've yet to be that guy.
That guy.
Uh that guy. But yeah, that was the only attraction I waited in line for. And meanwhile I was riding Haunted Mansion, Space Mountain, Buzz Lightyear, Tron, Pirates of the Caribbean, all these like what I would consider quintessential Disney attractions, and I wasn't waiting. And the standby line for Pirates when I had my lightning lane was like 45 minutes, and Space Mountain was an hour and 10, or no, it was 110 minutes. So like that's yeah, hour 110 minutes is almost 2 hours, and I boarded in less than 10 minutes. Like it was a
Yeah.
station wait basically. So I I can't say enough about it. I mean, again, I realize it's not one of those things that it's not for everyone, especially if you have a big group of more than one person. But
Mhm.
I think the benefits outweigh the cost. Um, and then the individual lightning lane, the ability to kind of pick your time for Tron if you buy it early enough in the day, I think was worth my $20 as well, because it meant I got to have a back to back ride.
Awesome.
The other the only other thing I want to touch on that I forgot to mention at Magic Kingdom is I rode Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin, and the ride it had its moments of breaking down, but if you frequent certain corners of the internet, you know where the high point targets are on this attraction. And if the ride stops, you can still fire your gun. And as it so happened, the ride stopped, and I was in the room where you've got Zurg on the right hand side in his spaceship, and the Z target on the bottom is like 100,000 point target. So I had on the one gun, I scored 999,999. The second gun, I scored 999,999 because I was
Wow.
just sitting there. I was the only one in the ride vehicle. The ride had stopped for a little bit, and then it ended up. The lights came on, like the safety rails came up. I thought we were going to get evac, but they reset the ride, and my score reset. But I had managed to get a picture
Oh,
of it. But
good.
while I was still in the room, um, the car went back to zero, and I got 999,999 again.
Again?
Yeah, I got it three times, just
Wow.
firing on this one target.
Target.
And so, me being the adult child that I am, I went to the register in the store, the gift shop exit, and I went up to the cast member and I said, "Do you guys still do the stickers for Galactic Hero?" And because they do, if you pro tip, if you get the triple or 999,999, almost a million points, they'll give you a little sticker that says Galactic Hero on it. And you have, if you show them a picture with your phone or whatever, they'll just give it to you. And the cast member, to his credit, he goes, "Yeah, we still do it. The ride didn't break down, did it?" And I looked at him and I kind of gave him the side eye shifty glance, and I was like, "No, it definitely didn't. You didn't notice any any breaks of people entering your gift shop, did you?" He goes, "Good answer," and then he gave me one of the stickers. So shout out to that guy because he made me feel really good and really ashamed at the same time. But
That's awesome.
awesome. Yeah, it was good. I'm gonna keep that sticker. I've got it in my my theme park bag. I'm gonna probably put it up on my bulletin board here in my office, just because it is a you know it's an honor that I'm really happy about, even though I kind of lucked into it but whatever. It's tough to do. I've got the picture also that has the
Both
nines on both scores. So
awesome.
That'll be a good one. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. If you're listening, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing on all podcast platforms and YouTube where we have this on an audio version. I think eventually we're going to go to a video version. I think Nick and I were talking before the show.
Let's do it.
We're going to try it. You're going to see how ugly we are in person or in video form.
Brace yourselves.
Brace yourselves. But also make sure you're following Coaster 101 on all our social media channels. We're at Coaster 101 anywhere you can consume the platform. I also have a website that we've handed out a couple of times, coaster101.com. We've got Coaster 101 merch, which I think I said on social media the other day. If you like Coaster 101 t-shirts and things that look like other things, our TeePublic shop is a great resource for you. So that is c101.co /TeePublic. So you'll see all of the designs that I will say are inspired by other designs, and we'll leave it at that. And yeah, thanks as always to JM Music Design for our theme music. Actually, they're JMMD Entertainment now, so shout out to JMMD Entertainment for our theme music. They've got a lot of great shows coming up at parks across the country this season. But Nick, appreciate you hopping on, and hope you and Kyle have a blast this week at Top Thrill 2 Media Day, and can't wait to hear all about it on a future episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. We will talk to you again soon.